Good afternoon and welcome to the Seth Joyner Show this week. I got a great guest for you, but before we get there, I got to apologize to you guys. I am in Salt Lake City and I got my time screwed up. Even as I scheduled the show, some of you guys thought that the show was yesterday. That was my fault. I apologize. I scheduled it incorrectly and it's my fault. So hopefully you guys are here. I know some of you guys are here, but if not, spread the word that we're here. So much going on in the world of the NFL right now. The Patriots are making massive moves. You got guys moving and jumping from team to team. You got teams with no salary cap space. They're coming up on tomorrow, the beginning of the fiscal year for the NFL 2021, and teams are trying to get under the cap, and you've got teams that are already under the cap that are at a major advantage for being so. Our Philadelphia Eagles haven't made a move. They haven't done anything. Everybody wants to know why. The fans are upset. They're ticked off. Hey, they don't have any money, and they've got 24 hours to get under the salary cap so that at least they can be operational once the year starts. Now, once the year starts, that's a different deal, but by then, all the top-notch guys are going to be gone, to be honest with you. They just didn't have the money. To help me break it all down for you guys today is my good friend. You guys know him from ESPN. He's a rabid Eagles fan, and I am happy and proud to have him on the Seth Joyner Show today. Kevin Nagandi is joining me today. Kevin, how you doing, my friend?
Seth, what up, man? So my background, I just got done Sports Center, the 6 p.m. show on the East Coast. And so what you're seeing behind me are plenty of our offices and my little workspace here off the set. So it's great to join you. And there's a lot to cover. And unfortunately, there's not a lot of conversation with our Eagles when it comes to making moves. But in the last hour, I think they just hit under the cap because of the Goodwin situation going back to the 49ers. So he doesn't play for the Eagles at all last year. And now the big question is what's going to happen next with Zach Ertz. And we can handle all that in this conversation. Good to join you here.
Awesome. Listen, I appreciate it. I know you're a major Eagles fan, and we haven't chatted since everything went down with the Philadelphia Eagles. So give me your thoughts. Give me your thoughts on Doug Peterson being fired, Howie Roseman being retained, Carson Wentz being traded, Jalen Hurts, now the number one guy without competition, according to Jeffrey Lurie's mandate, and most importantly, Nick Sirianni, the new head coach of the Philadelphia Eagles.
So, listen, the one thing that has stood out this offseason is, we saw it towards the end of the season, a lot of finger pointing, right? It's not my fault. It's not my fault. It's not my fault. And when you look at this team, you and I have talked on Twitter back and forth. There are a lot of people that deserve the blame on how this thing blew up 3 years after winning the Super Bowl. And it's not just one person at the center of it all. I think there's a responsibility that Doug had in this. Of course, the quarterback in Carson Wentz. But then, the two people that are still here, clearly the owner. And I think Lurie, if you look at his track record, he wants stability. But the GM being here and being able to conduct a coaching search, again, not many GMs get this possibility of more than 2 times you get to pick out a head coach. And for Howie Roseman to be in a situation like this, it just speaks to the relationship that Howie has with Jeffrey Lurie. And it has been well documented by the Philadelphia media through the last few months and trying to understand, like, wait a second, you guys are going to blame Doug, you're going to blame Carson, but then who else is responsible? Well, the GM right now is responsible for why they were kicking the can down the curb and they had to, make all these restructuring contracts with their salaries to fit under the cap. That happens everywhere in the NFL. The big question is this team better off now than they were at the end of the season? I'm not sure. I can't really give you an opinion on Nick Sirianni. And if anybody really does, then good luck. You have a crystal ball, because I don't think it's fair, because the guy can't be judged. He doesn't have a track record. And the team and the coaching staff that he's assembled, they don't really have track records when it comes to established coaching in the NFL. Right. So it's really hard to get to get a sense of where this team is going or where they're going to be in September with Jalen Hurts as their quarterback. The one thing, though, Seth, you and I have seen is this emergence of Lurie's opinion weighing in a lot more and more. And it's been more put out there by fantastic reporters in Philadelphia covering the team that Lurie is got a lot of Jerry Jones in him. Right? It's not really public here nationally, but locally, there's a lot of Jerry involved in Jeffrey Lurie's decisions where he sees a guy and he wants a guy, or he makes I don't understand how you benefit by saying Jalen Hurts is our guy. We don't want to bring in a lot of competition. That doesn't help Jalen Hurts, I think. I think you need competition. You could probably speak more onto that when you're in camp and you're heading into your second year and there's a lot more questions than answers.
Well, I posed this question to, my guest last week, and I said, I don't think that Jeffrey Lurie is the type of owner that's ever been, hands off. I don't think that he's ever been that guy that hasn't been in the loop, so to speak. But after Doug Peterson was fired, that press conference was like gold for the media.
Yep.
I mean, I sat and I watched the entire 50-minute press conference, and I wound up taking about 50 minutes worth, 5 pages worth of notes. I mean, it was just gold. I mean, if you could extrapolate the information that he was saying, he was basically saying we're rebuilding, but without saying we're rebuilding. Mm-hmm. That there was, a disconnect between Doug and I. That, hey, Doug probably wasn't going to survive another season in Philadelphia to be able to rebuild this thing after what he went through in 2020. So this was the proper move for not only Doug but for us also. Now, with the added involvement of Jeffrey Lurie, in your opinion, is it a good thing or a bad thing that he's so much more visible, so much more boisterous about what he wants and what's going on with the organization?
He can do whatever he wants, right? And you know the experience of bad ownership with Norman Brayman. You've seen it all, and you saw what he did to that phenomenal team in the late '80s, early '90s, in that roster, because he didn't care about football. So it's nice to have an owner that genuinely cares about football, an owner that I feel is all in on the city and building the stadium and making sure that they dug in the community. Lurie has done a great job for 25 years with that. But I think anybody will tell you around the league, let the football men make football decisions. And that could be football women as well. Let the football people make decisions because they are there for a reason. You have to trust them. You can't go by, I just watched this film and I like them and it fits the narrative on the analytics. That just doesn't work. Let the football guys decide, right? And I just feel like when you look at the way the Eagles have gone about their draft the last couple of years, you walk away and you're like, did all the football guys in the building make the decision here on these first and second round picks? Because they have struck out at a time too where you spend all that money and you talk about the dead cap hit with Carson, but when you go all in on the quarterback at $25 to $35 million a year, you need to nail your first and second round picks. Because they're the reason why the structure of everything works with the salary cap. And when you strike out with that first round pick and that second round pick, like they have badly the last couple of years, where you're not getting any impact players in those first 2 rounds, this is where you're at, right? Where you're pressing the rebuild constantly. You're kicking the can down the curb. You're overspending. Perfect example of this, Seth, is look at what the Patriots are doing, right? They spent all this money on tight ends the last couple of days, right? They're admitting early on that, boy, what they did last year, drafting 2 tight ends in the 3rd round, was a failure. And all the people that they're drafting right now, especially a wide receiver, they have failed developing any talent. N'Keal Harry's a perfect example, developing any talent at the wide receiver position. So many of these moves that the Patriots are making, it's Belichick, the coach, admitting that Belichick, the GM, has failed, right? And I think that's where the Eagles are at right now. When you're still looking for a wide receiver, and you struck out with the second round pick with JJ, and who knows? The jury's out still on Jalen Reagor, and it's too early to define him. But he needs to stay healthy, right? And it hurts even more when you see Justin Jefferson picked right after the Eagles, right there. Are the football guys making the decision there? And then you don't have the luxury a year ago. I like Jalen Hurts a lot, but you don't have the luxury to waste a second-round pick on a quarterback when you already have a franchise quarterback there. And when you could have had Chin right there solving some questions that they have right now at safety. And I think this is all catching up to them when it comes to the decision-making from people behind the scenes. Are the football guys deciding on draft day where to go?
Okay, so let's talk about the last 5 years, because I think you have to in-depthly look at the 5-year run of Doug Peterson to really understand why this team is where they are. And then the question is, was it worth it? Was it worth the way that Howie ran the team? And most would say because of 2017, absolutely. Okay, so their mindset was, okay, we got a rookie quarterback or young quarterback on his rookie contract. So that gives us the flexibility to go out and build a football team. They built the team. I don't think anyone expected 2017. I think that Doug Peterson and Howie Roseman and Jim Schwartz and everybody is still pinching themselves over what happened in 2017. But at the parade, Doug stands at the podium at the Art Museum and says, "Welcome to the new normal." Okay? So now the mantra is, we're hunting Super Bowls. Mm-hmm. So now you're almost in a position where you have to mortgage the future if you're going to do that, because you still have the flexibility of having a rookie or young quarterback that's still on his rookie deal, and where you see needs, you're trying to address those needs through free agency, because you're not seeming to, like, to your point, you're not getting it done as far as the draft is concerned.
Yep.
So they mortgaged the future. And Jeffrey talked about it, and Howie talked about it, that, hey, we knew that this day was coming, that we would have to tear it all down and start over. Now, those weren't their words. No owner's ever going to say that, because they've got a stadium to fill every year. If the owner told me, hey, we're in rebuild mode for the next 2, 3, 4, 5 years, guess what? I'll watch it from my living room every week. Yep. So they're never going to say that. But that's where they are. And they're at that juncture because they won the Super Bowl in year 2 of Doug Peterson's tenure. And then they made the decision to chase Super Bowls, the rest of the way, because they weren't getting it done through the draft. Was it worth it?
And I know. By the way, we talked the day of the parade, right? I was hosting it for ESPN, and
right.
We were on the phone, and it was just everything about that run was surreal, right? I think you nailed it. No one expected a Super Bowl run, and then they called lightning in a bottle. I think Howie, we're going to say stuff about Howie. Howie crushed that offseason, right? Mm-hmm. Leading into the year. Every single free agent pickup, boom, nailed it. Boom, nailed it. Boom. The Robinson pickup, the Long pickup, like everything was lining up perfectly. Aguilar was stepping up, it felt like, I think that what happened then was a certain arrogance, right? Oh, we're good to go because, look, we've got Carson, and Carson's going to be good for us, and no matter what we're going to do, it's going to make sense. And then when you let that kind of fester in and you don't stick to your core and understanding that, listen, you've got to go back to sticking to what's going to hit on draft picks. You can spend all the money in the world, but in the end, the bottom base is that first 3 to 4 years of the draft picks, because you're keeping that salary down low. So you got to have impact players those first 2 or 3 years, right? And I think they got really sentimental. And I loved Alshon. You give Alshon the contract. The Jason Peters back and forth. Am I retiring? I'm not. I want this and I want that. I mean, he's the godfather. I love Jason Peters. But you've also got to have kind of a cold heart and say, in this business, we've got to move on, right? Mm-hmm. And I think all of those sentimental things, something that Howie wasn't sentimental in the past, right, when it came to business dealings, and something with the organization. Shoot, look look at how they handled, B-Dog. They decided to get in front of this instead of getting crushed later on. That cost them. I think when you get sentimental in these things, you crush your cap situation down the road. And that's what happened here, right? I feel really bad to a certain extent with Doug, because I'm not sure if you saw the Jeff McClain report from the Inquirer and some of the stuff that he was getting from sources inside. Like when you and I have talked about this many times on Twitter, and we've gone on rants in the middle of the season where you got to like Miles Sanders in the backfield, and then you abandon the run, right? And then some of the quotes in that article where you see that they beat the Packers that special night, right? And, the owner's not happy because they didn't pass the ball enough. Then you're starting to say, wait a second. How much power did Doug have, right? And then you start hearing stuff like, there was another report, I think, in January, and I actually heard this, and I'm sure you probably heard some of this, that, Carson during the season was audibling out on a lot of plays that Doug was calling, because I always came back to how come this offense has always looked different with Nick Foles and even Jalen Hurts compared to Carson Wentz, right? And was it because Nick Foles and Jalen Hurts are running the plays that are called, and is Carson now audibling out on a lot more and holding on to the football a lot more and then making some of these mistakes? I think we're going to hear more of that coming out. And you start to wonder, how much control did Doug have? And then how much control did Doug have on when it came to who they were drafting and the decision-making and the coaches that they were bringing in? And then where was Carson's role on the offensive coordinator and the QB room? Like all of that stuff, when you give certain players too much power early on, it can bite you in the ass. And I think this was the perfect storm of all of that coming together here. And my biggest concern right now, Seth, with this team is I go back to the draft, and I'm going to say this over and over again. Granted, they got draft picks here for Carson. Granted, they're sitting at number 6. They can't screw this up, and they've got to let the football guys in the building make the football decisions on these picks this year, because if they don't, we are just going to be in a rebuild mode for a very, very long time down the road.
Well, I tell you, the thing that scares me the most is, and I don't know, Nick Sirianni may be a great head coach. Shane Steichen may be a great offensive coordinator. Gannon may be a great defensive coordinator. The jury's out until we see what they put on the field. The thing that scares me the most is that for the second time, Howie has hired a head coach that he controls. Okay. For me, that's scary because, the head coach's job is to run the football team. When I hear that Howie's going to be the guy that makes game day designations, that he has, total say, that worries me.
Yep.
Because who better than the coach knows what players that he needs on a given Sunday? Because you may have a guy that's nicked up, and you might need an extra player to back that guy up because you never know whether he can make it through a whole game. The coach knows that. The coach understands that. The GM shouldn't be the one that makes that decision. I fear that, we're looking at the Doug Peterson situation all over again because, listen, when the Eagles hired Doug Peterson, no one had an iota of faith that Doug Peterson could pull off what they pull off. I would assume to say that Jim Schwartz was the insurance policy if Doug Peterson fell on his face. Okay. But they had a guy that they could control, and they had an insurance policy in place. This time around, Howie's done the same exact thing. All the viable head coaches that were out there, they came in for interviews. It seems to me that every single guy that had a strong slant about himself, a guy that wanted some kind of control and a guy that wanted some kind of say, that the Eagles weren't interested in that type of guy. I would go so far as to say that maybe even Jeffrey Lurie has now wandered over into that space by some of the things that I'm hearing. How do you tell your new head coach, hey, this guy is going to be the number 1 quarterback? And oh, by the way, no matter who we bring in to back him up, we don't want a quarterback competition. We just want him to be the guy. How does that help Jalen Hurts? How does that help the entire football team? And what kind of message does that send to your team that, hey, I'm the starter. If I'm the starter, there's no competition. I'm the number one guy. That doesn't fly in the NFL.
100%. You nailed it. And when they were looking for a coach, I was saying, why would any veteran coach come to this situation when they have no power? And when I heard Lincoln Riley's name being told, I said, why would Lincoln Riley take his first head coaching job in a situation where he has no power and things are going to be dictated to him on what he's going to do? Why would he do that? Stay in Oklahoma where he's the man, and then he has the opportunity to go somewhere like Urban Meyer where he's going to gain control, right, of an organization. That's what scares me big time here. And I think you nailed it 100%. And then when you have Howie and Lurie as the structure at the top making football decisions, I start to think, do we have a Jerry Jones situation more and more, or even a Daniel Snyder? Let's stay in the dysfunction of that division where Daniel Snyder had relationships with certain players, right? And those certain players were untouchable in the locker room. And they knew it, and they had all the power in the world, and it did not matter what they did. And there was one thing that stood out, right? No accountability in the locker room. And Seth, you can speak to that more than anybody. When you have no accountability in the locker room, that means that team's going to fall apart because they look around and say, all right, that's the owner's pet. It doesn't matter what he's going to do. I'm going to get called out for mistakes, but that guy won't. Or he won't own up to it because he can just go past the head coach and go all the way upstairs and make the phone call. And when you have that kind of setup, that is dysfunction to the highest level throughout the entire organization. And case in point, the Cowboys haven't won since 1995. Washington hasn't done anything. That organization hasn't done anything in decades. And the only reason why I think they're doing something right now is because of Ron Rivera. Because I think that Ron Rivera has some power. And what has he done? Accountability with Dwayne Haskins. I don't care that you were a first-round pick and the owner loved you and he wanted you over everybody else. You're not going to have accountability and showing up for meetings on time. You're going to take this easy, then you're out of here. And when you don't have somebody in the locker room doing that and you don't have a strong presence, the trickle-down effect is damaging, and not just in 1 year. It is multiple years because players see all that happening, and you're not developing any type of talent. And I think you nailed it. This is the biggest fear, I think, for the Eagles moving forward.
Well, I think, it's interesting because, you look at what transpired with Carson, and I like yourself, I'm of the belief that, the Eagles didn't hold his feet to the fire the way that they should have. They didn't hold him accountable like they held everyone else accountable. A lot of people got upset with the comments that Malcolm Jenkins, put out there after this season. But there's some truth to it. The truth is the truth. You can't change the truth. It is what it is. And if a veteran on that football team saw that, then that means that everybody else saw it and they saw it as a problem. And because, you couldn't rein this guy in, or didn't want to rein him in, because you couldn't make him, accountable, then he could never really step into the leadership role that he should have stepped into because your locker room was divided. And it wasn't so much, what Carson was doing. It was so much more how Doug and Howie and everyone else in the organization allowed Carson, to do some of the things that he was doing. When I look at Jalen Hurts, there's a lot of people. Listen, I'm not 100% sure that Jalen, will be the guy. I honestly believe that he's a guy that's built for Philadelphia, much more so than Carson was because of the things that he's been through, understanding, and growing and understanding the city and understand what's required. He's not a guy that's going to ever shirk it. He's going to be a guy that's, hey, you know what? Hey, he's going to claim responsibility. That's the thing that Carson wouldn't do.
Yep.
His mantra was, I got to do better, be better, I will be. That's not good enough. When you're the leader of 52 other guys and the rest of the rabid city of Philadelphia is looking at you after a game, you have to step up to the mic and take responsibility. Jalen Hurts will do that. Now, I don't know whether, they can develop him the way that he needs to be developed, whether, he'll turn into the player that everyone thinks he is. I'm one of those people that believes that he will be, that he can be, because he has all the intangibles to be. That's yet to be determined. But I just feel like they got to create some competition. You got to have somebody behind him. Who are you going to sign? What veteran are you going to bring in, that can be a mentor to him? What guy, if he gets hurt, are you going to bring in that can step in and take the reins? Because it's not guaranteed the way that he plays. The one benefit that he brings that Carson lost after the knee injury is that he's going to scan the field. If it ain't there, he's got an internal clock that says it's time to go. Yep. And he's going to get out and he's going to go. Okay? He plays smart. He gets down. But, listen, things happen. You got vision that's out here. You can't see everything that's coming at you, and anything can happen. So my question as far as Jalen is concerned, listen, I believe that the guy can get it done. But I'm just this no competition thing just – it eats at my craw every single time that I read about it, because the NFL is built off of meritocracy. The quarterback position is the one position that shirks that, because when you draft a guy in the first round of top 10, top 15, he's the only guy that gets to bypass that. And you're going to give him every opportunity to prove that he can be the guy. But everybody else has got to prove that this job is mine. And I think that Jalen Hurts will benefit from the competition more than he will not from the competition, because he's a guy that embraces competition.
He is Nick Saban, the football player. Like knowing him and knowing what he was like at Alabama and then Oklahoma, the guy can adjust to anything, right? And no matter what, he will always have a chip on his shoulder. He's also one of those natural leaders. In the locker room, you're going to see, and you probably have heard about it, the young guys, while they're watching and also they didn't want to offend Carson Wentz. You are going to see this offseason, they are going to gravitate to Jalen Hurts because now they feel like they can, right? Because Jalen just walks into a room, and you're right. The city will love him. I don't know if he's the answer, but I also think he deserves this year. Like, I think they need to hit at number 6 with a wide receiver and an impact player immediately to help your quarterback, right? And then give him the opportunity to just give him 16 games, right? And then you can kind of assess, do we need to do something else next year, right? I love Sam Howell at North Carolina, by the way, when it comes to quarterbacks. But like Jalen Hurts to me this year, this upcoming season, deserves it. I'm with you. I do not understand why you would say it publicly that we're not going to have competition. If you feel that way, fine. Okay, but why do you need to publicly say it? Like, Jalen Hurts is not one of those guys that I think is sensitive to, oh, gosh, you said this, and now I got to deal with. I think the man is just like, get me on the field, I'm going to win the job, regardless. I think that's who he's always been. That's how he's built, right? He's the son of a coach. There's no BS about Jalen Hurts. What you see is what you get, right? So I don't understand why you would publicly say it, and at the same time, I'm with you. Why not bring in a Jacoby Brissett, right? When Nick Sirianni has that time with Brissett in Indy. And maybe it's because they don't have the money, right? But They need to have a veteran quarterback. I think because the way Jalen plays, just the way you play as a running quarterback, and who knows what the kind of system that they're going to have. But if they do not have wide receivers that can gain separation and they have any type of injuries on the offensive line, that quarterback's going to be scrambling a lot, right? So you're going to have some insurance policy. And I just don't understand. I don't understand why you need to specifically say that publicly, he's our guy, we don't need anybody else, or have that even leak out to, the Adam Schefters of the world, who's, by the way, a close friend and colleague who kicks butt on every story. Why is that even out there? Because it shouldn't be out there. It should be within closed quarters. We're not going to say anything. This is our guy, but we also want to have some competition because that's healthy for a young guy in his second season in the league. So I'm with you, man. There's some head-scratching decisions, and we still don't even know what they're going to do in free agency because I've got some big question marks at safety. They're in trouble at safety, Seth, and and I know they're because McLeod's not healthy by the time September comes around, and you're in a passing league, and you don't even have a second cornerback. I just don't understand the thought process here and what they're going to do. And that goes back to also missing on some picks later in the rounds last year where you don't have depth in the secondary that you're nailing, and it's come back to haunt them the last few years.
So, question, okay, the Eagles sit at number 6. Do you take Jamar Chase? Do you
Without
take
question.
Do you take?
I don't
Me.
even finish. I just go straight to the podium and I get Jamar Chase. If Jamar Chase is available, and I love Devontae Smith, if Jamar Chase is available, I don't even hesitate. Like literally, the clock starts 1 second off. The pick is in. That kid is a special talent. If he would have came out last year, I would have considered him maybe one of the top receivers, maybe the number one wide receiver. Put on the tape. If anybody's watching this, put on the tape and see what he did against Clemson in the national championship. He had a quarterback that was covering him that's in the NFL right now, and Jamar Chase ate him alive. So without question, Jamar Chase would be my pick if he's available.
Okay, so he opts out of the season this year. You realize that, he's not going to play football for almost 2 years by the time you get him on the field again. Yep. Do you worry? Are there any concerns about that? That's the first side of the question. For me, the rest of the question was Devontae Smith, Kyle Pitts, or do you trade out of 6 to amass more draft capital? And I know the thought, well, based upon how he is drafted, I'm not so sure that those extra picks will make that much of a difference. But I have to ask the question because that's where I sit. I think that the Eagles have too many holes to stay at 6. And as great as Jamar Chase may be or is going to be or potentially will be, will one guy get you over the hump this year? Maybe not this year, but down the road. Will it make that much of a difference right now opposed to filling some of the holes that you have for the future?
Seth, you read my mind first off because you knew I was about to say that it doesn't matter if we have more draft capital if they're not hitting on any of these picks, right? 6 just feels like it's the one sure thing. Like hypothetically, let's just play this game because if they move down, right, I could see like a team like the Panthers try to move up. And if they don't get the chance to move up in the top 5 and they still covet a quarterback, they try to move up 2 spots at 6 to try to get one of the 4 quarterbacks that everybody's talking about, right? And if the Eagles can get that 8th pick and you slide a couple picks back and you still have the chance to get Devontae Smith or Kyle Pitts, I would strongly consider that, depending if you get more capital, maybe late. Maybe that's another 2nd-round pick, right? And you can find an impact player. And to me, that kind of stuff can make sense. I love Kyle Pitts, Philly kid. I think the guy is going to be a difference maker, a game changer. But when you have Goddard there, how are you going to use Kyle Pitts 2 tight end sets? We know it works with the Belichick era. We know it works with Doug Peterson. I don't know how it would work with Nick Sirianni because, Kyle Pitts is one of those guys too, and I shouldn't limit him as a tight end. The way he could stretch the field, the guy's a beast. I mean, like he's just an oversized wide receiver, right? Masquerading as a tight end. I love Devontae Smith's toughness. He's Marvin Harrison, I think, 2.0. And I don't mean to put pressure on the kid, but that I think his work ethic is fantastic. They just need to hit on this pick for a playmaker immediately. And as for Jamar, opting out, it's a really good question because you got those questions with Micah Parsons, Penei Sewell, guys that are still going to be in the top 10 that opted out, right? And you wonder, is it going to affect them? I look at it the other way. I look at it, okay, less wear and tear. And wide receiver, it doesn't – the kid's a dog, man. Like, the kid wants the ball. The kid's not afraid to make big moments and big plays. And I don't think you lose a step at all. And that's how much I love Jamar Chase. Like, we see the impact Justin Jefferson has had, right? I love Justin too. Jamar Chase was – above and beyond the number 1 wide receiver on that team with Justin Jefferson. And Jefferson had a phenomenal season, a record-breaking season if you look at it, right? And the one thing I kept on hearing, leading up to the draft on Jefferson was, this guy's a dog. He's going to win everything. He's super competitive. And it's the same thing with Jamar Chase. And you can't buy that, and you can't, develop that in the NFL. It's built in, Seth. You understand that. When you get those guys that come in and they're hungry and they want to actually go head-to-head against the number 1 CB in every single game, you just say, yeah, man, that's what we need, because you're going to bring a swagger that's going to be affected by everybody on the team, and it's going to help the quarterback, at least when he has to get rid of the ball quickly.
Well, I'll tell you what, I'm like I said, I'm in the camp of trading back, but you're swaying me a little bit on Jamar Chase. I believe that the Eagles are more apt to take one of these guys that are slotted where they are, than they are to, take a Jay Jaw out of position or take a Jalen Reagor ahead of a Justin Jefferson because of what has happened in the past.
You're right.
And they're less apt to move back because, they feel like the organizationally, they got the heat. They got to get the heat off themselves. Howie's got to get the monkey off his back, So he's more apt to say, okay, if Jamar Chase is there, I'm taking him. If Kyle Pitts is there, I'm taking him. Just because they missed so many times with him, going rogue dog all by himself and making a pick and saying that, oh, everybody else was on board when, we all know that everyone else was not on board. My only concern with Kyle Pitts is, Dallas Goedert is a willing blocker. Is he a great blocker? No.
Mm-hmm.
Zach Ertz, tries to, but at times you look at him and he's not a willing blocker. Okay, if you're going to run 12 personnel, then that means that, in passing situation, now you can flex Kyle Pitts. You can do a lot of different things with him. But when you need to run the football, are you going to get the blocking out of him that you need? And for me, it's like, okay, if I'm gonna draft a tight end, at number 6, he better block. He better have speed to stretch the field. There's a whole lot of things. He's got to check every single box. Box. Okay. And if he doesn't check every single box, then you're almost better going off with the wide receiver that can stretch the field and give you that, and then trying to find the other tight end somewhere else.
I think you nailed it right there. They've got, and it goes back to, they've got so many needs, right? Like if they didn't have Goddard, then you say, okay, Kyle Pitts makes sense, right? Because Kyle Pitts is a game changer, right? They can spread the field. But they have so many needs here. And it is critical that they got to hit one of those needs. They don't have the luxury to say, okay, we're just going to add this because we've already got that. No, it's like, we've got this hole. We need to fill that in right now. You're an immediate starter. Like whoever they get at 6 has to be an immediate starter. Whoever, if they do a trade down, they have no time to develop. I'm sorry, but that's the situation they're in, because they haven't developed the last couple of years, the guys that they've taken. I mean, the Dillard pick, like the day they made the pick, it made sense, right? You're like, all right, yeah, this is perfect. You're filling a need.
No,
right now,
it didn't.
Dillard should be fitting that exactly what they need, and it just blew up in their face. And the J-Jaw stuff, like, okay, great, he can block. Well, we need a wide receiver that can catch, can run.
Kevin, let me tell you, that Dillard pick, in my opinion, I understand what they were doing. When you look at him on film, he's got really good feet.
Yeah.
I mean, he has feet like Lane Johnson, but you know what the difference is? He doesn't have any dog in him.
Yeah.
I could look at his college tape and see that he didn't have dog in him. And I'm a little biased because, when I look at football, I look at the different divisions and I look at how they play the game, okay? There's very few offensive linemen that I look at that comes out of the Pac-12. And that's not saying, that, the Pennell kid, the guy, I forget his name, he plays both guard and tackle at USC that's coming out this year.
Yep.
It's not to say that those guys won't be great players because they played in the Pac-12. But the Pac-12 is a finesse. They're a finesse conference.
Yep.
They're a finesse conference. Listen, they don't play defense. They don't play physical. Okay, they don't run the ball at you. It's just every game is just a score fest.
Yeah.
Okay, 42-45, 51-53. I'm like, that's just finesse football. So that, Doug Peterson said when he came here, I want road graders up front. So he went out and they made the trade for Brandon Brooks. They bring him in, true road grader. And then you go and you draft Andre Dillard, who was crying in practice one time. And you're going to tell me that guy's a road grader? He's more like roadkill than road grader. And I'm like, some of these things just don't make any sense to me.
Yeah.
If you want guys, your offensive linemen, if you got to control the line of scrimmage on both sides, then you can't miss on those guys that live in the trenches. Those guys have to be dogs.
Yep.
They have to be bona fide fighters, bona fide dogs, and there's no puppy, no poodle in them.
100%, Seth. And if you need any proof right now, just look at the tape of 2017 with the Eagles, right? Because there were dogs on both the offense and defensive line, all of them across the board. And I go back to how no matter what, the balance that they had in running the football helped Carson so much. And then when you have LeGarrette Blount coming in, and because he can run behind that line, they don't have that. They don't have any of that. They've turned into like a 7-on-7 finesse, and we got the speed down the field and all that. But if you don't have dogs up front, that is still the bottom line. Look at the Super Bowl just this past year. The Bucs front line dominated. They dominated Patrick Mahomes because they had dogs all up front. Shout out to Todd Bowles as well on doing what he did. And I want to know what's the identity of the team. And you know what? Listen, you bring up a good point too. Let's just say hypothetically, let's go back to this trading out, right? Trading out from 6. If you drop a little bit, you can get the kid Slater from Northwestern, the offensive lineman. Boy, I'm not sure if you see that. That dude's a dog. Mm-hmm. I mean, he's a nasty dog. And he slides right in perfectly on what they want to do when it comes to an identity with this team. So I can see scenarios, and I know I'm all about, you got to hit on a playmaker. But if they walk away from that young man from Northwestern, I'd be happy as hell. And I think Jalen Hurts would be sleeping a little bit better that night.
Well, listen, you guys are watching the Seth Joyner Show. My special guest, Kevin Nagandi of ESPN, is in with me. Kevin, I know you got to go. I want to send you home to your family here soon. But before you get out, let's just talk a little bit of free agency. It seems to me that the Patriots' way has shifted. I have never seen the Patriots in the free agent market to the tune that they have been in the free agent market. Bill Belichick said last year, hey, we're not going to be a good football team because, we don't have any money. Yeah. That's pretty evident when they only offered Cam Newton $1 million. Well, they got plenty of money this year, upwards of $70 million in cap space, and boy, are they spending it. They've already given away $50 million in bonuses alone. They re-signed Cam for a year for $14 million. Jonnu Smith, 4 years, $56 million. Hunter Henry, 3 years, $37. Jalen Mills, they poached, from the Eagles. 4 years, $24 million. Nelson Aguilar, ex-Eagle. Mm-hmm. And listen, everyone's talking about how Bill Belichick takes the Philadelphia Eagles and the ex-Eagles. The thing that I know that Bill knows, that the one thing that we don't do very well in Philadelphia as a coaching staff is we don't develop our players to the maximum of their potential. And the one thing that Bill Belichick is fantastic at is figuring out what your skill sets are, developing your skill sets, and figuring out how to plug them into where he needs you. Jalen Mills brings a lot of diversity. Mm-hmm. He can play corner, he can play safety, he can play slot. So Bill's looking at that, and in his mind, he's like, "Oh, I can use that guy all over." Oh yeah. They have to address the wide receiver position. Nelson Aguilar goes to the Raiders last year and has a breakout year. They get him locked in. Matt Judon, 4 years, $56 million. Kendrick Bourne, 3 years, $22 million, and Davon Godchaux, 2 years, $16 million, and Henry Anderson, 2 years, $7 million. And I would venture to say that they're not done.
No,
because I think that Bill Belichick knows what's coming. The new TV deal and the new streaming deal is going to be $100 billion deal. and how that translates to what the salary cap is going to look like next year, whether we have fans in the stands or not. And I think in advance of understanding that, along with the fact that they do have cap space that they're spending to build, because everyone thumbed their nose at Bill Belichick last year. And Louis Riddick, I love the job he does on your show. He's like, you guys just wait. You think Russ wants to cook? Watch Bill cook.
You nailed it. And we had Lewis on SportsCenter earlier tonight too. And but here's the thing. I think also he's not going to admit it publicly, but this is like you and your girlfriend, or your wife, you've been dating and you've been together for how many years? Nearly 20 years. And then that wife goes over and marries somebody else, and she is living the life. And then you're stuck for a year with nothing. And now you can spend all the money you got, and you're going out with everybody possible. And that's what's happening with Bill Belichick watching Tom Brady hoist the Lombardi Trophy. His wife for 20 years went somewhere else, and she is happy as hell, and everybody stopped talking about him. And he's just like, you know what? Forget this. I am going to make sure that I'm going to be relevant in every conversation that my wife's brought up in. And I think this plays a huge role in this, where he no doubt knows that, and you hit it on the button here. Bill is the best in the NFL history in identifying talent and finding a way to plug that talent and work in my system regardless, right? And I think last year was a major shock to him, where he realized, we don't have enough talent, and my coaching is only going to get us so far. And I think that him deciding to do all this also is a reflection that the Patriots have struck out when it comes to drafting specific playmaking guys. You lose Gronk, that tight end position has been horrendous the last 2 years when it comes to production. So what do? You draft 2 tight ends in the 3rd round. A year later, you realize it didn't work out. So you got to overspend. Johnny Smith and Hunter Henry, Zach Ertz must be looking like, wait a second. Even on an off year, I've had better careers than these guys, right? Now, Hunter Henry's pretty decent, but when you look at the money and what Zach Ertz is making, he's just like, this is ridiculous. So I think what you're seeing from the Patriots also is, like you said, we've got this money down the road that we can also absorb with the bigger cap. Same way we saw Jerry do with Dak, right? I think what the Patriots need to realize, though, and I think they do, is they've got to find the quarterback answer. And I like Cam a lot. I just do not think Cam's the answer long-term here. And I don't think Cam's going to be starting for the Patriots in the middle of the season. I think they draft a quarterback, they develop that quarterback, and they wait and see how long they can go with this quarterback sitting on the bench, figuring things out, and then they insert him halfway through the season for a long run there. Because listen, I brought up Brady, but also Belichick's fully aware of what's happening in Buffalo, right? And what's brewing in Miami. And he knows that, all right, listen, if I don't get a hold of this right now, Buffalo's confidence is going to be on another level with that quarterback, Josh Allen. And then Tua gets another year here to figure things out because they have a ton of talent and those draft picks the next 2 years. I think Bill's realizing that now or never, we've got to make this move. And I've got to find a way to figure this out now, especially with the market being so depressed. We could take advantage of people staying back and being assertive now. We have these guys in the next 2 years. So I love what the Patriots are doing, but I also think the Patriots are admitting that they have struck out with their draft picks, especially playmaking picks.
Awesome stuff, my friend. Hey, I'm going to let you run, man. I tell my guests every week, our time is our most valuable asset. I thank you, man, for the last 50 minutes that you spend with me because I know your time is valuable. Have a good night, and I appreciate you, my friend.
Seth, I had a blast, man. It's great to finally get the chance to talk to you here, and looking forward to our conversations on Twitter. Stay healthy and safe, all right?
Awesome. You too. Take care, man. All right, guys. It is you and I for the last 10 minutes of the show, talking anything that you want to talk. Let's fire away some questions and talk about what you want to talk about. I would assume that many of you guys want to talk about the Eagles, but there are so many things going on in the world of the NFL that, hey, we can talk about that as well. We can talk about some of the comments that Kevin made. Listen. I think that Cam Newton once was an elite level quarterback. I think he has uber talent. I think that, coming off an injury last year, and you couple that with the fact that, he's learning, a new system. I think that Cam Newton is going to have a comeback year this year. I could be wrong. But I believe that he's going to have, a phenomenal year this year with improved offensive line, improved talent, so on and so forth. I look for Cam to have a bounce back year. Let's go to some of your questions. So Dustin Heinz wants to know, how about Andy to the Bears? Hey, listen, to be honest with you, I think it's a non-starter. I mean, really, what's the difference between Mitchell Trubisky and Andy Dalton? It's not that wide or that great of a difference when you really stop and you think about it. I just think that, the Bears would do themselves the greatest favor of, drafting another quarterback. Now, we know that they're not going to do that. Brian Pace, I believe, is the GM of the Bears, along with, Nagy. I think that they're on the hot seat. So they've got to find a viable quarterback this year that can help them get to the next level. I think it's playoffs or bust. I think, if the Bears organization doesn't see that this team is poised and set to take the next step, and that means getting to the playoffs, at least a wild card spot, that Matt Nagy and both Ryan Pace may be out of a job next year. Let's see. What else we got? Let's go here. So Toby Cooper wants to know, are the Birds keeping Zach Ertz? That's an interesting question because, I keep reading about all these opportunities, teams that are interested in Zach Ertz. And then, I hear Zach Ertz, come out with a comment, that everyone believes that he's going to be staying. And even if he's traded, from what I understand, he won't ask for a contract extension. I think that was the sticking point last year, was the contract extension. And the fact that, that the Eagles couldn't make it happen or didn't want to make it happen, that is what really upset the apple cart. At the end of the day, the Philadelphia Eagles are going to have to make a decision. I think that, I would like to see if they're going to make a move before the draft so that you can get some draft capital. But I also think at the same time that what wound up happening with Zach Ertz is that, now he's kind of in the same position as Carson Wentz. Everybody knows that potentially they're going to move him. So why would you offer anything of value when you can wait for the Eagles to have to release him or settle for, a similar type of situation as they did with Carson Wentz? Because everyone felt like, well, if Matthew Stafford could garner 3 first-round draft picks, Carson Wentz could, surely get us 2, not after what he posted last year. Zach Ertz is in that same boat. His value for the Philadelphia Eagles have been diminished because of the year that he had last year. So the Eagles have got to make a decision. In the process of rebuilding, yes, Dallas Goedert is still young. You're still paying, Zach Ertz, upwards of $10 million a year. Does it behoove you to keep him? Does it behoove you to take a Kyle Pitts instead and move on from Zach Ertz? I think only time will tell. Only time will tell. So the seeker of truth wants to know, Sam Darnold would be a cheap alternative. Come on. Listen, I believe that Sam Darnold his development has been greatly arrested because of the inefficiency of the Jets organization to not only build around him, But to have him stuck with Adam Gase for the first 2-3 years of his career has just been criminal. But until he can prove something that would substantiate that kind of value, I don't see where you could put any stock in him and bring him in as someone that would either back up or compete with Jalen Hurts. That really doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. I think, a team like the Chicago Bears would be a great landing spot for a guy like Sam Darnold. Not the Philadelphia market, not in the least little bit. My good buddy, Lawrence Melton, wants to know, what do you think the Eagles should do at safety now that Jalen Mills is gone? Well, I don't know that Jalen Mills is going to be the answer at safety. The Eagles drafted Kevon Wallace a couple of years ago, last year, out of Clemson. And I think, he's done a whole lot of chit-chattering and a whole lot of, lip bumping on Twitter last year. It's time for, this young man to step up and show and prove, or the Eagles need to be drafting maybe another safety somewhere along the way with some of these picks that maybe they can get through either trading back in the draft or trading Zach Ertz to address that position. Because I think that the only way that you can create competition at that position as well. That's why I say the competition is so important. You draft another safety, say in the 3rd or the 4th round, you bring him in and he's a viable competition guy for Kevon Wallace. Now all of a sudden you begin to create competition at that position. You speed up the development and you speed up the desire of one Kevon Wallace, or you find out that he's not the guy. But I think that that's really what they need to do. And listen, Lawrence, if the Eagles are in rebuild mode, it's really not going to matter. It's not going to matter because, the defensive side of the ball is where they're most deficient, I should say. And it's going to take time. These young guys need experience. They need playing time. They need time to learn, the system. And everyone's going to be learning a new system and trying to figure out how it works and how they fit into it. And, what's the reason why you do certain things within, a specific call. That's just, where the Philadelphia Eagles are at this time. Let me see. Isaac Ware, what about Fitzmagic? Listen, the Washington football team was coming last year with inefficiency at the quarterback position. Now, I'll tell you what, Ryan Fitzpatrick can be Fitzmagic. He can be Fitztragic. From play to play, quarter to quarter, game to game. But what he does do is he gives the Washington football team a valuable quarterback, a placemat, if you will, that can get the job done. If he's protected and they have a good run to pass ratio balance, Ryan Fitzpatrick can be a headache for a lot of football teams. In my opinion, with this move, even if the Washington football team does draft a quarterback this year, they just made their football team better, and it's an upgrade. I like the mind and the competitiveness of Alex Smith. The truth of the matter is Alex Smith can't move anymore. He can't run. He can't get away from, and that makes him, a sitting duck and a liability and a concern for a football team that realizes that their offensive line isn't a finished product yet and that they need a quarterback who has some mobility or a guy that will get rid of the ball and get rid of it quick. Okay, let's see. Let's stroll down. So the Eggman Rivers, what Rivers are you talking about, man? Phillip Rivers just retired. They're not getting him out of retirement. I saw the comment and I just had to click that one. Let's see. Oh, this is interesting. Billy Cole wants to know, do you think it's time to trade Fletcher Cox? Wow. Hey, listen, when Fletcher Cox wants to play, there is no doubt about it that, he can be an elite level football player. My problem with Fletcher Cox is that Fletcher Cox doesn't seem like he wants to play all the time. Fletcher Cox doesn't seem like, to me, one of those players that really, really loves the game of football. And that's problematic to me when you've got a guy that's signed to a 5-year, $100 million contract, that's averaging $20 million a year, that doesn't give it his all the time, because he could be a Hall of Fame tackle. He could be a Hall of Fame player if he played with the type of energy that an Aaron Donald did. And a lot of people will say, oh, they're different players. Not necessarily. They are different players. But my thing is, Fletcher Cox needs to get in shape for football. Fletcher doesn't look like he's always in shape. He doesn't look like he's always prepared. He doesn't look like he's always ready, to get the job done. And I think that, at the end of the day, I think the Eagles have, listen, I believe that he was one of the guys that they restructured. I mean, once you start restructuring guys, you're not really looking to trade that guy. And I think that Howie and Jeffrey and everyone else in the organization still sees him as a top flight, defensive tackle, just simply because, he's continuing to make the Pro Bowl every year off of reputation so much more than production. But he's getting close. He's getting very close to the point, in my opinion, where the Eagles need to start thinking about what they're going to do with him. Because in my opinion, if you paid him an average of $20 million over the last 5 years and his contract is up in another year or two, what kind of contract is he looking for next? And my thing is, even though he's made the Pro Bowls, the production in my mind hasn't been there that warrants him continuing to make that kind of money, from this point moving forward. Because basically what you were paying for is a young, talented guy going into his second deal and the potential of what he could become based upon what you saw. Well, now we know what he is, and we know what he's going to be moving forward. As he gets older, he's not going to be the Fletcher Cox that we once knew him to be. So I think at the end of the day, that's a dicey question that the Eagles have to think about. And I think at the end of the day, you also think about, okay, if you decide to move on from him, what do you have at the defensive tackle position? What do you have at the most important juncture of the football game is the trenches? Can you dominate and can you control that area of the field without Fletcher Cox? And I think at this point in time, the answer is absolutely no, because they've had some misses at that position as well. Eggman, I'm going to give you one more shot, man. Here you go. So you want to know, why do you think the previous staff was so bad at developing players? Great question. Great question. I think in part, part of a coach's job is not only to prepare you positionally, it's not only to prepare you game plan wise, but a coach's primary job, in my opinion, especially a young player, is to develop their skill set. Now, being a coach, sometimes you got to be a dad, sometimes you got to be a psychologist, sometimes, you got to be a disciplinarian. There's so many hats that you wear as a coach. But as a developer, you have to know that position, the ins and outs of that position. And you got to be able to watch that player in practice and watch that player in game film and look beyond the X's and O's and give him the tools to be able to go out in the field and do what they do. That requires that you as a coach really understand the position. So you get young coaches that come into the league. You get coaches that start off as quality control, and then they start off maybe as a defensive back coach, and then the next thing you know, they move them over to linebackers coach. Well, before they even got a clear understanding of how to coach defensive backs and what it takes to develop those players, you move them over to linebacker. And now they're the full-time linebacker coach. And what skill sets about playing linebacker do they understand, do they know? Little if none. So now you got these young players that you're drafting, and you're hoping that they develop and turn into big-time ballers. So whatever skill sets they brought from college is the only skill sets that, continue to manifest themselves and get better, because that coach can't teach them anything about playing the position of linebacker. They can teach them from an X's and O's and a schematic and a conceptual standpoint, but they cannot teach them how to play the position and what they're looking at and the steps that they should take and how to read blocking schemes and how to pattern read in zone and how to even cover a guy man to man. If you don't possess the knowledge of that, how can you move that knowledge forward to your players? And at the end of the day, I realize that a player can only be as good as the knowledge that position coaches can pour into them in the beginning years of their career, or else they're just they may get better. They're going to get smarter and they're going to get wiser if they're smart enough to study, be a student of the game. But skill-wise, they will plateau and they won't be able to reach the potential that's built deep down inside of them. I look at some of the Philadelphia Eagles linebackers, and listen, you can't tell me that some of those guys, you're not going to tell me that Sean Bradley can't play. You can't tell me that Davion Taylor can't play. You're not going to tell me that Alex Singleton can't be even better than what he was last year. But until those guys get the skill sets based upon a linebacker coach who knows how to develop talent, they can look at each player and say, okay, he's not dropping well. I got to show him how to drop. He's not covering backside of the backfield and tight ends well. Let me show him how to cover. He's not an efficient blocker, efficient blitzer. So let me teach him some pass rush moves, how to rush against a back, how to rush against a tackle, how to beat a tight end when you're one-on-one against a tight end and he's got you in pickup. Until you get a guy that can teach those aspects of playing the position, unfortunately, the players just don't get better. All right? Ladies and gents, that's the show for tonight. I thank you guys for joining me. I want to thank again Kevin Nagandi of the ESPN for joining me. He joined me for about 45, 50 minutes tonight. And I wanted to get him out. He's been at work all day. I wanted him to get home to his family. But listen, I thank you guys for continuing to support the Seth Joyner Show week after week. I'm going to do my best to continue to bring you the best content and the best guests to keep you guys entertained. I will see you guys right back here next week, same place, same time. And as always, take care of each other and be good to each other. But most importantly, love each other. Peace.